Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this Dreadnought in the style of the Salamanders chapter for your games of Legions Imperialis. So now the first thing I've done is I've primed the model white. I've put it on a spare bit of sprue so it's a lot easier to get around the model and to all of the details that we'll need to paint. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm coming in with some Vulcan green. I'm going to paint this all over the model. Now this is a very thin layer paint, so it's going to take a couple of layers to build up to a solid coat of Vulcan green all over the power armour. Just make sure you build up in a couple of layers of Vulcan green until we've got a solid coat all over the armour. Vulcan green is the colour of Salamanders from the Horus Hersey era. It's a much darker green than the brighter green of 40k Salamanders. But this will give us a really nice base for the rest of the colours to work from on our Contemptor Dreadnought. After a couple of layers of Vulcan green, you can see I've built up to a solid coat all over the model. So now it's time to pick out some of the details on the model. So first of all, with some Abaddon black, I'm going to come in and paint this on areas of trim such as the shoulders here. I'm just going to pick these out neatly with a couple of layers of Abaddon black. I'm also going to apply this onto the tops of the legs. And I'm going to apply it all over the casing to the weapon as well. Just going to make sure I pick all of these areas out nice and neatly with a couple of layers of Abaddon black. Once again, keeping this nice and thin so I don't obscure any of the detail on the model, but just picking out some of these details I want to be black with a couple of layers of Abaddon black. And with that Abaddon black applied, you can see it's picked out some of those details and broken up the colour on the rest of the Dreadnought. So now it's time to pick out some metal details, and for this I'm coming in with some lead belcher. I'm going to be really careful here and just pick out any of the details that I want to be metallic. So it's things here like these exhausts on the back of the Dreadnought. Some parts of the body we can see exposed. Going to pick out any of these parts with a layer of lead belcher. I'm also going to pick out any of the detailing on the weapon as well. I'm going to make sure I pick all of these out with a layer of lead belcher. So going to be things like the barrel to the weapon here and these ammo boxes at the back. Just picking these out with some lead belcher. And with that lead belcher applied, there's only one base coat left to apply to this Dreadnought, and that would be to pick out some of the areas of brass trim. So for this, I'm coming in with some Balthazar gold. I'm going to apply this to the trim here, going around the head of the Dreadnought, being nice and careful around all the other colours we've already painted. And I'm also going to pick out the coils here on his weapons as well, just to add some interest and break up those other colours. So I'm just catching these with some Balthazar gold. And with that Balthazar gold applied, that's all the base coats applied to the model. So now the next step is I'm going to shade the model. For this, I'm coming in with some Nuln oil. I'm just going to apply this all over the model. And apply it over everything we've already painted, the Vulcan green, the Abaddon black, the lead belcher and the Balthazar gold. Because of the scale to this model, you really want to make sure it's not pooling too heavily in any of the areas, or it will really stand out once it dries. Just make sure you shade all of the model with some known oil. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. And after that shade has dried, you can see it's added definition all over the miniature, sunk into all of those recesses, and really added interest to the model. So now with some Lauren Forest, I'm going to come in, I'm going to start highlighting all of the Vulcan green on the model. So for this, with a really small brush, I'm just applying a really thin edge highlight on the edges of all of the panels to the armour of the Dreadnought. So you want to keep these lines nice and thin, work your way around the model, and on every raised panel, and the edge of every detail that we painted with Vulcan green, just going to apply a thin line of Lauren Forest as an edge highlight. This step will take a little while, but it's really worth it because it will make all of those details pop and add interest even at this tiny scale. So really take your time at this step and just work your way around the model and apply a really thin edge highlight of Lauren Forest to the edges of all of the details to the armour. If at any point you do come in a little bit too thick with any of these edge highlights, can come back in with some Vulcan green and thin them down. But just make sure you take your time, slowly work your way around the model, picking out all of the edges with a thin edge highlight of Lauren green. And after that edge highlight's been applied, you can see it's really added detail and definition to all of the panels of armour to the Dreadnought. So now with some Mechanica Standard Grey, I'm going to come in and highlight all of the black details. So much like I did with the green, just applying a really thin edge highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey to all of the raised edges of all of the details we painted black. So once again, take your time at this step. Keep these lines nice and thin. Just make sure you catch every raised detail we painted black with a thin highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey. And also make sure I pick out any of the raised details here on the casing to the weapon, just to pick those out, break up that black, and add some interest to the model. And with that grey highlight applied, you can see it's added interest to all of the areas of the black on the model. So now it's time to start highlighting some of the silver details. So for this, I'll be coming in with some Stormhost Silver. Be really careful. I'm just going to pick out the sharpest points of any of the details that we paint with Lead Belcher. Just going to catch the sharp edges and most raised details and catch these with a really thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver. So keep these lines nice and thin. You don't want to obscure any detail. Just apply a thin edge highlight to all the areas of Lead Belcher. And after that Stormhost Silver has been applied, you can see it's brightened up those areas of silver. So the next step is going to be to highlight the areas of brass on the model. For this, I'm coming in with some Gehenna's Gold. I'm just going to apply this very carefully to the top of this bit of trim around the helmet. And also I'm very carefully going to pick out the raise point of the coils on the weapon as well. And with that Gehenna's Gold applied, there's all of the details edge highlighted. There's just one last thing left to pick out on the Dreadnought, and that'll be the eyes to the helmet. So for this, I'm coming in with some Evil Sun Scarlet. Now make sure I've got a really fine tip on my brush. I'm just going to apply a little bit of this into the eye sockets on the Space Marine's helmet. So be really careful, just apply a small spot into the eye sockets. And with that Evil Sun Scarlet applied, that is how to really quickly and easily paint up a Dreadnought for Legions Imperialis in the colours of the Salamanders. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments down below. Are there any other chapters that you would like to see me paint for Legions Imperialis? Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And happy painting!